Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Rich Revolutionaries podcast. Today is part one of another solocast series. This time, we are integrating the dark feminine to leverage your too-muchness, all of those areas that society, family, culture says you are too sensitive, too emotional, too sexual, too sensual, too intelligent, too intense, too quiet, too loud, too whatever it is, into exactly what you were known for. And the polarizing factor of your magnetic leadership. This is going to be an exploration of the gifts of fear, rage, shame, and grief. And today we're kicking it off with fear. But before we get into the story that's going to anchor it all in, I want to make it so clear that, as I just said, to be magnetic, to be attracting the reality that you desire, that are the seeds of destiny that have been planted within you, is to be polarizing. Meaning, you cannot please everyone. You cannot be a good girl and be in your magnetic leadership. It just defies the laws of physics. So, first of all, we're going to get real comfortable with being misunderstood, disliked, and probably rejected a lot over here, okay? Because we will be expressing the emotions and the taboos that you were conditioned to suppress. Why, you may ask? Because you are far too powerful in your full range expression, especially as a woman. So, in my world, you get to be seen in that full range, including the raw, the messy, the chaotic, the seductive, the wild, and intense parts of you, so that you can clear the feeling pathways and the expression pathways in your body, right? To experience emotional freedom, full spectrum liberation, because you aren't hiding or compensating for anything. You're not living in your mind because your body feels like an unsafe place to be due to these clogged up pathways. You cannot be controlled, manipulated, or distracted away from your mission. So essentially, the architecture of the matrix of the mainstream, whatever you want to call it, is no longer effective in its innate design that gets superimposed on your innate design. You are operating as your divine soul blueprint self, fully expressed, which means you're going to fully feel the range of life interfacing with your body, right? Because operating in the world in this way allows you to be anchored and integrated in integrity, in your authentic power. That is unconditional love, right? First, for ourselves, allowing that full range of whatever we're feeling to be, whatever life circumstances come at us, we're feeling them, and then we're alchemizing it into action that fuels our mission, that is delivered through the vehicle of our business. That's what we're doing around here. So welcome. Welcome to the Rich Revolutionaries podcast, and welcome to my world, where we celebrate the dark feminine, the light feminine, the masculine, all aspects of our being, and allow them to come into integration. That is your process of individuation, which actually is dissolving separation in a fun paradoxical truth that is the nature of the universe. So, if all of this is interesting to you, I want to invite you to the spotlight session, which is a open call I'm going to be holding once a month. The next one is happening on May 20th, depending on when you're listening to this. You can always check out my link in bio to know when the next one is. And there, we're going to play in the sacred theater where all of these emotions, all of these characters, all of these themes of your hero's journey get to be played out in the spotlight where you are witnessed with unconditional love so that you can come into the full expression of whatever it is that you are experiencing or that you did experience that is creating an upper limit for you to experience what you are destined to experience. Okay. So the next one is going to be focused, honed in on creating space and fluidity to shift from fear to desire, because really they are two sides of the same coin. And that's what we're going to be exploring through a fun storytelling session today. So this is a story of fear to fulfillment, and we're taking it back to actually when I last lived here. Hi, I'm in New Brunswick at my parents' place. Longer term, actually, that is not true. To one of the stints, last time I lived here was after I came back from this, but that's a story for another time. We're orienting ourselves in a multidimensional reality right now. So this is 2020, end of the year. Okay. I have been laid off from my job as a flight attendant. My roommate was finishing her master's degree and moving to London, and our lease was coming to an end. And I was like, well, I don't know what's next for me because the airline gave us zero information on what the fuck was going on because of the plandemic that the government was rolling out, was happening with so much secrecy and bullshit that we were told it'd probably be like a couple months and then you'll get called back. So it's like, oh, I'll just go hang out with my parents until I get called back. Fast forward 4 months, we're now in dead middle of winter where it's not this beautiful outside. I'm like, I am not gonna stay here any longer. So what the fuck am I gonna do? I was like, I gotta travel again. That was my whole identity at the point. It was the like fun drunk on who traveled. But I was no longer having fun. I was no longer traveling. And I was like, oh my God, where am I gonna go? Where's open? So I was looking at Mexico, where I now live, foreshadowing. But at the time, I was internalizing so much fear from the collective that Mexico is not a safe place for Canadians to live. Not true. Now I know that. But at that point, I was still wrapped up in the collective drama of it all. And so I was like, okay, where else? Costa Rica. My sister had been to Costa Rica. She wanted to go to Costa Rica again. And I was tracking the flights and I noticed that there was outbound flights from New Brunswick to Costa Rica at the beginning of January 2021. And then the flights dropped off at the end. It's like, I'm getting on that flight. I'm getting out of here. Let's go. And when I told my friends and family that I was going to Costa Rica on a one-way ticket in the middle of a pandemic and I had no plan, I didn't know where I was going to stay, and I was not planning on coming back at any point in the near future, they're like, what the fuck? You can't do that. It's like, watch me, watch me. And this really came to a pinnacle when I was having this conversation, hard conversation with my mom of like, I'm going. And she's like, you're going to get killed. You're going to end up like in like being human trafficked, like, blah, blah, blah. You know, all these things. And I was like, listen, I have my own fears to navigate in this situation, and I'm going to go whether you like it or not. So you need to deal with your fear so I can deal with mine. This was the beginning of me setting boundaries with other people and rooting into my sovereignty. So that was a big conversation for me to also have these fears of like, what the fuck am I doing? But I have this undeniable calling to go to Costa Rica and get the fuck out of the collective anxiety spiral that was going on in Canada at that time with all the fear mongering during the pandemic. So I remember this conversation. My mom was like crying at me and my heart was pounding. And I went to sit we have a little meditation room just actually through that window right there. And I was just breathing and feeling the fear and like rooting into the decision that I had already made. So after this conversation, I drove 2 hours to the closest like sports store because we're in the forest out here. As you can see, it's beautiful, but it is very far removed from accessibility to, like commodities. So I went to get a 55-liter backpack at the store and I booked a flight for me and my sister on my flight passes that I still had at that point. Hopped on a plane, and 3 days later, I was in Costa Rica. Okay. We attended a week-long retreat together. My sister, my niece, her friend, we traveled together. They hopped back on the plane where the next phase of the COVID like lockdown and like quarantine and vaccine mandates were all rolling out. Like, I'm staying here. Like, where are you gonna live? I'm like, I don't know. So I hopped on Instagram and was just looking at like, okay, what is around? TikTok wasn't a thing really yet that much at the point. Like what is around this retreat center? Like where can I go? And a friend of a friend had volunteered at the surf camps. It's like, perfect, I'll land there. It's not too far. I'll make friends. I'll figure out what to do. Like that's a later problem. All I need to do is like one step at a time. I'm in Costa Rica. I have a place to go after this week retreat is done. And this became the most fulfilling, like life altering experience, adventure of a lifetime. From that decision that I made in 3 days, navigating mountains, like lineages of fear, to living there for 10 months, having my best, like, jungle reconnection, like wild child. Imagine me barefoot walking around with the like I love it in Costa Rica so much. Like if you've ever been, you just know the vibrancy of nature there because nature is still the prominent occupant of the land in some places. Unfortunately, this is changing and gentrification is very real, which is why it's more important to invest in land stewardship projects than in land ownership and acquisition. That's a conversation for another day, but I'm going to leave that in there. I continue to volunteer in these different communities, hostels, eco, what are those called? Like eco Airbnb type of style places where you pitch a tent type of vibe. Yeah, that was me. Okay. And I reconnected to the wild essence that I live by now, this primal feminine nature within myself. I rerouted myself in community. I'd been living such a hyper individualistic life before this where I would like show up to work, I would do my flights, I would go home, I would like smoke my weed, I would eat my Uber Eats, I would go drink my face off, I would watch Netflix alone in bed, and then like repeat, 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 you know? I didn't have a real sense of community of people that I was building these deeply intimate long-term relationships with. Okay? This is when I got connected with ceremony, or I was going to weekly ecstatic dance. We were praying over food. I did my yoga teacher training. I did my Reiki training. I launched my business of evolving consciousness. That is the beginning when I was in Costa Rica, figuring it out. Okay. Fear is going to tell you that you can't make a leap because you don't know like XYZ thing's going to happen after the leap. And desire asks you to just take the next scary step towards your destiny, towards fulfillment. Okay. when I did this, the opportunities just kept lining up and kept lining up and kept lining up. And yes, of course, there's challenges. There's things that did not go perfectly, as you know, if you know more about my Costa Rica experience. But the point of me sharing this story today is that fear gets to be your friend when you are openly connected to it. It becomes a catalyst to taking action and to feeling your most alive life. Anytime you are breaking out of the known pathways and molds, the traditional job, being an employer, even if you own your own business and it's inside of a business model that feels like suffocating to you, where you're trading your time for money, where you're trading your presence with your family, where you're paying somebody else to raise your kids, where you're sending them to the god's forsaken education system. And I'm talking about the like public, private sector, like primary, middle school, high school, all the way to your fucking PhD. That system is fucked up and I will die on that hill, okay? When you're breaking out of these molds of the good girl, of the professional, of the one who has their shit together, has their ducks in a row, of course you're going to feel fucking terrified. That is the price of freedom. Fear is your ally in creating a new reality for yourself when you transmute it into new choices, right? When you allow it to move you. When it's suppressed, though, when it stays stifled beneath your level of consciousness, beneath your perceptual, sensual awareness, it becomes the cage that you live in. So, in order to shift your reality, in order to integrate your dark feminine, in order to be in your magnetic leadership, whether that be leading your company, leading your business, leading a movement, leading your family, leading yourself, leading your relationship, we're all a leader in a certain capacity. And I am here for the ones who have a bigger than life vision that they are stewarding, that is the calling on their heart, that is the reason they're alive, right? You are responsible to learn the language of sensation, to grow the capacity to feel the fear and redirect its energy through movement, through your body, through your choices. And this is the capacity that we're building inside of the spotlight sessions that I'm holding once a month. Depending on when you watch this, the next one might be May 20th, if you're watching this before then. And I invite you to come play inside the sacred theater, to allow those fear sensations to arise so that you can become familiar with them and unblend from the story that you're telling you and become fluid and efficient at shifting that fear into desire, one action at a time. This is what we're doing inside of the spotlight sessions, and you are invited to join for free for now. Eventually, I will charge for these once the flow has broken past the escape velocity, as you would say. My desire for you is to be able to walk with your fear, right? I have a tattoo on my shoulder. It's my first tattoo. You see it. It says fearless, right? And this was released with Taylor Swift's first album. Actually, no, her second album. Her first one was a self-entitled like Taylor Swift album. The second one was called Fearless. And she had a whole quote around it. I used to have it on my wall in my bedroom here as a teenager. And the whole concept of being fearless is not to be without fear. It is to feel the fear and jump anyways. I also invite you to come to the next podcast episode of Rage to Passion, where we're gonna get into another story. I'll give you a little sneak peek. This is around my rage towards the system of, well, you felt a little bit of it today, but of patriarchy, capitalism, and all of the structures of society right now that we get to build new ones, to rebuild new earth villages. I'm so excited to dive in with you there. If something sparked an insight, a question, maybe I triggered you a little bit, please reach out to me on Instagram through the DMs. Let's continue the conversation there. I always love to connect with the listeners and keep the flow of reciprocity moving. Until next time.